She was barefoot when they brought her out. Dust clung to her ankles like a second skin, cracked and browned from years of labor beneath open sky. No bonnet. No shawl. Just a sun-faded dress that had long lost its shape, and the kind of silence that made even drunk men look away. They tied her to the post with a frayed rope, like they'd done to horses. She didn't resist. Didn't blink. Just stood there, back straight, chin low, while the town square leaned in, half out of curiosity, half out of cruelty. The auctioneer cleared his throat, shuffled papers that weren't necessary, and raised his voice to the slow heat of the afternoon. 19. Strong. No known ailments. Can work long hours, field or house. Doesn't talk back. Someone laughed. A woman in a plum skirt muttered something sharp under her breath. Another waved a fan even though there was no breeze. The girl said nothing. Off to the side, her mother leaned against the saloon rail, arms crossed, lips pursed tight like she was trying not to spit. Her eyes were hard with drink and disappointment. The way she stared at her own daughter, like she was nothing more than a broken rake, cut deeper than the sun. "She ain't worth much," the mother called out, voice thick with liquor. "But I'm tired of feeding her. She's yours long as you take her today." That's when the whispers started. "That girl? The orphan from out past Dry Creek? Thought she ran off with a trader once. No kin but the woman who sells her off like flour. Ain't never seen her smile." The auctioneer didn't stop the sale. Didn't pause. Just looked around and asked, "Who'll take the girl?" "She works quiet. Eats little. Doesn't ask for more." No one raised a hand. Not at first. A few men looked, then looked away. A shopkeeper chuckled and shook his head. One boy whispered something about used goods, and got elbowed in the ribs by his mother. The girl stared at the ground like she expected nothing and was used to that. Then a shadow moved near the back of the crowd. A tall man in a worn brown duster. No one had seen him arrive. He leaned on the railing by the blacksmith's post, hat low, hand steady. Dust coated his boots, not fresh but from some older road. Someone whispered, "Ain't that the widower from South Ridge? Thought he sold his cattle. Ain't got no help now. Maybe he's just here to watch." But he didn't watch. He stepped forward. One hand lifted, barely a gesture, but it broke the hush like a bullet. "I'll take her," he said. Not loud. Not soft. Just steady. The auctioneer blinked. "You'll take?" He nodded once. "She yours to sell?" The mother snorted. "She's mine to be rid of." The man stepped closer, handed over a few coins. Not a fortune. Not a bargain. Just enough. He didn't untie her right away. He just looked at her. She didn't meet his gaze. She looked instead at the rope, at her raw wrists, at the dirt. He took out a pocket knife, slow and careful, and cut the rope loose. She didn't flinch. He didn't touch her. "You hurt?" he asked. She shook her head. "You got a name?" No answer. "Don't matter." He stepped back. "There's a wagon waitin'. You come or stay. Your choice." For a heartbeat she didn't move. The crowd didn't breathe. Then she stepped off the crate. Her knees nearly gave. She caught herself. He didn't offer an arm. But he walked beside her, slow enough for her tired legs to keep up. And together they left the square, under the weight of 1,000 eyes. No one stopped them. They reached the wagon, wooden, plain, a mule hitched and restless. He helped her into the back. Passed her a canteen. Said nothing else. The town behind them faded into dust and heat and judgment. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't speak at all. But she drank the water like it was holy. And for the first time in a long time she let herself breathe. The trail stretched out like a ribbon of silence. Afternoon turned amber, then gold, then dusk. Shadows climbed up from the grass and clung to the wheels. He drove without hurry. She sat cross-legged, watching the road vanish behind them. No tears. No fear. Just a quietness too heavy for a girl her age. When the mule slowed to a stop, the sky had already gone lavender. In the distance, a weather-worn house leaned slightly to one side, flanked by a dying oak and a barn that looked older than both. "This is it," he said. She didn't answer. He lit a lantern, helped her down. "Kitchen's through there. Your room's upstairs. You hungry?" She shook her head. "You clean?" Another nod. He opened the door. Held it for her. Inside smelled of cedar and ash. No lace curtains, no doilies. Just wooden floors, rough worn furniture. A single picture nailed above the hearth, too faded to make out. "You don't owe me," he said. "I know," she replied, her voice thin, dry. He pointed to a staircase. Top of the steps. Left room. She went up. Didn't close the door behind her. He didn't follow. In the morning he found her already at the sink washing the mugs. "You don't have to," he said. She replied without turning. "I don't mind." They ate breakfast in silence. No questions. No small talk. She noticed his limp. He noticed the way she flinched when the wind slammed the door. Later she tried to sweep the porch. The broom handle broke. He fixed it without a word. She folded the towels into squares. Kept her voice in her throat. He brought her a shawl when the night got cold. Laid it over the banister. Never told her to wear it. And so the days passed. Not with drama. But with quiet. A silence that wasn't empty, just waiting. She noticed how he fed the mule first. Always. How he touched the fence posts like old friends. How he said good night at the same time, every night, even when she never said it back. He noticed how she winced at thunder, how she peeled her bread before eating it, how she stayed outside long after sunset, staring at the horizon like it might offer something better. One evening she asked, "Why'd you take me?" He didn't answer right away. Just poured coffee into 2 mugs, handed her one. When he finally spoke it was low. "Because no one else did." She stared at the mug. Steam curled between her fingers. "You could have picked someone prettier," she whispered. He didn't blink. "Didn't need pretty. What did you need?" He looked out toward the barn. Someone who wouldn't leave. She didn't say anything more that night. But she didn't sit so far from him the next. The girl with dust on her ankles had come to a house that didn't ask questions. And the man who had nothing left had just made room for something he didn't expect to keep. Neither of them believed in hope. But that porch, under the bruised purple sky, held 2 chairs. And for the first time both were filled. The girl woke to light she didn't expect. It filtered through muslin curtains, pale and soft, as though it was trying not to startle her. The bed creaked when she sat up. She half expected a knock, a shout, a demand. None came. Downstairs the house moved slowly. Floorboards groaned in old rhythms. Somewhere a kettle whispered. The rancher was already outside. She folded the quilt over the mattress the way she'd always done. Edges tight, corners squared like a soldier's bed. Habit from a life where order was survival. The kitchen still smelled like last night's bread. A note sat on the table in a man's hand. "Coffee's on. I'm in the barn. Feed's in the trough if you're up for it." No signature. No instructions beyond what mattered. She read it twice before folding it and slipping it into her apron pocket. A strange thing happened then. Her shoulders, always taut, slumped just slightly as if someone had loosened the string inside her. Outside, the morning was quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't press down but welcomed. She followed the trail of footprints toward the barn, each one deep and careful, as though the man who made them carried things he never spoke of. He didn't look up when she entered. Just kept hammering a bent hinge into place. The sun slipped through the slats in golden stripes. Dust floated between them like old ghosts. "I can help," she said. He didn't stop working. "You sure?" She nodded. "I'm used to work." He gestured toward the hay. "Pitch it out if you like." Fresh bedding stacked near the wall. No comment on how she'd slept. No questions about her past. Just space. That was his way. They worked like that for hours. Him repairing a broken stall door, her shoveling and sweeping, the air between them light and unspoken. A rhythm began to form, not quite harmony but not dissonance either. Just 2 people doing what they knew how to do. By midday, sweat had curled strands of her hair down her neck. She didn't ask for water. He handed her a tin cup without a word. She drank. Handed it back. Their fingers brushed. It was nothing. It was something. Later, she stood by the fence, arms draped over the top rail, watching the wind stir the grass like a mother stroking a child's hair. He came to stand beside her, quiet. "You built all this?" she asked. He nodded once. "Most of it." "Why?" He stared ahead. "Because someone had to. And I was still here." She didn't ask what that meant. She didn't need to. That evening, she chopped carrots while he brought in firewood. The air inside the kitchen thickened with the scent of stew and the crackling of logs. The house no longer felt entirely hollow, just paused like a song waiting for its next verse. She noticed things. How he placed his boots side by the door. How he never slammed a cupboard. How his hands, calloused and cracked, could move with care. He noticed things too. How she turned her face toward the heat like she'd been cold for years. How she always took the cracked plate, the smaller portion. How she listened more than she spoke, as though words had once gotten her hurt. The next morning she found a folded cloth left on the table. A new apron stitched by hand. Not fine, but thoughtful. She traced the hem with her fingers like it was gold. By the 3rd day she knew the pattern of his steps on the porch. He knew the sound of her hum when she peeled apples. They spoke little. But the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of things that didn't need saying. But the ghosts, they lingered. He passed by a narrow door at the end of the hallway each night without touching it. She noticed the way his eyes darkened when he saw it. The way his jaw tightened for just a second. Once she reached for the doorknob. It was locked. Later she asked him about it. Used to be her room, he said. No name. No explanation. She didn't press. That night as she lay in bed, she thought about all the rooms she'd been locked in. The ones with boards nailed across the windows. The ones with words like property and payment hanging in the air like smoke. And now here she was, free to leave and too uncertain to move. In the middle of the week it rained. Sudden. Like the sky had finally decided it couldn't hold itself together. She stepped outside, lifted her face to the downpour. Let it soak her. Let it baptize the parts of her that still believed she was worth something. He watched from the porch, dry and still. Then he took off his coat. Walked over. Draped it across her shoulders. She didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. He didn't pull away. That night they didn't eat in silence. She told him about the first field she'd ever worked in. About how her hands bled that day and no one noticed. He told her about a foal born too early. About how he stayed up 3 nights nursing it only for it to die anyway. They didn't cry. But something softened between them like thaw beneath snow. Still neither of them reached. Neither of them dared name what was growing. But they both knew. The next day the town sent word. A neighbor had seen her in town, the auction girl, they whispered. A man came by offering coin to take her off his hands, assuming she was temporary, borrowed, something to be returned. The rancher didn't reply with fists. He just said, "She's under my roof. You'll leave now." That night she asked, "Why do they hate me?" He didn't answer right away. Then, because you remind them of something they don't have the guts to look at. That they'd trade a daughter for coin. That they'd let it happen and laugh. She looked at him, saw something in his face that made her feel less alone. "I'm not broken," she said quietly. "I know. I'm just tired." "I know that too." Then they sat on the porch again. Not close, but not far. And the house, old and aching, breathed again. Just once. A long exhaled breath. That night she left the door between their rooms cracked open. Not as invitation, but as trust. He noticed, but didn't step through. Not yet. They weren't ready for that. But the floor between them no longer felt like an ocean. And that was enough, for now. The sky was already heavy when they hitched the wagon. Clouds bloated and bruised hovered above the ridge like something waiting to break. The girl stood at the porch rail, fingers twisted in the shawl he'd left there days ago, watching the distant town as though it might vanish if she blinked. He stepped beside her, pulled on his coat. "You still want to go?" She nodded. "We need flour. Salt. Maybe thread." He nodded back. No lecture. No worry. Just quiet agreement. They rode in silence, the road familiar now, every jolt in the trail absorbed in their bones. She sat straighter than she used to. He noticed that. And she noticed he checked her hands when he passed her the reins, like he wanted to be sure the calluses were healing. When they reached town the wind had changed. People noticed them this time, not just glances, but stares that lasted longer than decency allowed. "She's the one," someone murmured. "That auction girl." They walked side by side into the general store. The bell over the door rang once, then echoed too long. The shopkeeper looked up and smiled thin. "You back for seed, mister?" "No," the rancher said. "Just supplies." The girl moved quietly through the aisles. Picked up what they needed. Measured the sugar with careful fingers. But when she reached for the sewing thread, another hand shot out and slapped hers away. "You don't touch nothing delicate," said the woman behind the counter. She was younger than the girl's mother, older than her cruelty should have allowed. "This ain't a brothel's pantry." The girl froze. Her breath caught halfway to her lungs. The shopkeeper didn't interfere. The rancher stepped forward, slow and steady. "That's enough." The woman huffed. "You're the one who bought her. What's it matter what she touches?" He said nothing at first. Just looked at the girl's hand, the redness blooming across the knuckles. Then to the woman, "You speak to her again, you'll wish I'd raised my voice." They left without the thread. The wagon ride back was quieter than usual. She kept her face turned toward the horizon. Her hands stayed in her lap. "Sorry," he said finally. She shook her head. "You didn't do it. Didn't stop it either?" Her eyes stung, but she didn't let the tears fall. "I'm tired of being looked at like I'm something to scrub off a boot." You ain't. She turned to him. Then what am I? He took his time. You're what they're afraid to admit they threw away. Rain started as they crossed the final bend toward the ranch, soft at first like breath. Then louder until it smacked the canvas top like fists. Thunder cracked across the plain. The mule spooked. The wheels skidded in the mud. He pulled the reins hard. We'll have to shelter at the barn. They unhitched fast, rain soaking through sleeves, skirts, skin. She ran ahead, flung open the barn doors. He stumbled just behind, slipping once, catching himself against the frame with a grunt. Inside the storm roared. Wind howled through the rafters. The mule brayed. Water dripped through the cracks in the old roof like it always had. They stood just inside, soaked, panting, her hair stuck to her neck, his shirt clinging to every scar. Why'd you say that to her? She asked. Because it was true. But you don't know me. I know enough. She shook her head. No, you don't. You don't know what I've done. What I've let happen. I don't need to. But I need you to. He didn't move. Let the silence fall between them like the rain. Then, tell me. She looked away. Took a breath. Then another. I was 15 the first time he offered me to a man. My mother took the coin. Said I was old enough. Said this world don't give favors to girls who stay soft. She waited for him to flinch. To turn. He didn't. She continued. I tried to run. Got caught. Was locked in a shed for 3 days. No water. When they let me out, I didn't fight anymore. Her voice cracked. I stopped counting the men after the 6th. Still he didn't speak. She stepped closer to him, hands shaking. You bought me. Same as them. Maybe nicer about it. But same thing. No, he said. No. I didn't buy you. You handed over money. I paid to end something. She stared at him. He looked at her the way a man looks at lightning in the distance, afraid of it but willing to stand there just the same. I didn't know your story. Still don't. But I could see the ending they were writing for you. And you think you get to change that? No. I think you do. The barn creaked under the weight of wind and thunder. Then the roof gave a groan, a section near the loft buckled. He looked up just as the beam fell. She shouted. He pushed her aside. The beam struck his shoulder. He fell hard into the mud. She scrambled to him, heart hammering. Don't move. Don't. I'm fine, he rasped. You're not. She knelt beside him, cradled his head in her lap. Blood seeped through his sleeve. You're bleeding. It's not bad. It is. You're crying. She was. She hadn't realized it. I didn't want you to get hurt. I'd rather hurt than watch you get dragged back to hell. She blinked, trembling. You said I could change the ending. I believe that. She pressed her forehead to his. Then stay alive for it. He chuckled, weakly but real. That's a fine order. By morning the storm had passed. The light returned in cautious golden strips through the rafters. He sat propped against a barrel, bandaged. She brought him coffee, handed it over without a word. He took it, their fingers brushing again. This time she didn't pull away. He didn't either. The barn was broken. The house was still standing. So were they. The morning came soft as if the land itself were holding its breath. Mist clung low across the field like a memory refusing to lift. In the barn, the girl sat cross-legged beside the rancher, both of them wrapped in the silence that follows survival. She held a tin mug in her hands, no longer for warmth, but something steadier, ritual. His bandage was soaked through near the shoulder. He hadn't complained. He hadn't asked for help. Still, she brought him water and checked the wound, her touch practiced from years of tending others who never thanked her. You should rest in the house, she said. He shook his head. Roof needs patching. You almost died. He looked out the barn door toward the pale spread of morning light. Almost not the same as did. Her breath caught. Not at the words, but at how calm he was when he said them. She stood, wiped her hands on her apron, then looked at him with the kind of stare a person gives when there's no longer anything to hide. I need to leave. He didn't flinch. You can. I'm not saying I want to. I'm saying I need to. I know. Why aren't you stopping me? Because needing to go means you haven't chosen to stay. She swallowed hard. That answer hurt more than she expected. He rose slowly, wincing at the pain, but hiding it. Always hiding it. I'll pack the wagon, he said. I wasn't asking for help. I'm not offering it. I'm giving it. By midday her satchel was packed. Not much in it. A few clothes, the thread he'd gone back to town to buy for her, left it on her pillow without a word, and the apron he mended after she'd ripped it on a nail. He stood beside the mule, reins in hand, waiting. She stepped down the porch steps and paused. The house behind her loomed larger than ever. Not in size. And wait. I should be able to leave without crying, she muttered. You should be able to leave however you need to. She climbed into the wagon. He didn't say goodbye. Didn't ask if she'd write. He just nodded and turned back toward the barn. But the mule didn't move. She yanked the reins. Nothing. She tried again. Still nothing. The rancher looked back. He won't go. Why? Because he was born here. And animals know when they're carrying someone who doesn't really want to leave. She stared at the mule, then at the sky, then down at her own trembling hands. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. I thought leaving would make me free. But all I feel is empty. That's because freedom's not about going. It's about choosing. She climbed down. Walked toward him. Stopped just a few feet away. What if I stayed? She asked. He didn't move. Then I'd have to build a new fence line. She almost laughed. Why? Because it's not just my land anymore. Her voice dropped. Would I be your wife? He looked at her with that same steady expression he'd worn in town, at the auction, in every quiet moment between them. Not unless you want to be. She stepped closer. What if I don't know how to be one? Then we figure it out. He extended his hand, not as a demand, not as a claim, but as a question. And for the first time in her life, she answered one. She placed her hand in his. The wedding happened before the sun dipped behind the ridge. No guests. No preacher. Just two hands bound by mutual breath and quiet grace. They stood by the creek behind the house. The water moved slow and gold and wide, like time itself had slowed to listen. He asked, You sure? She nodded. I'm not clean. I'm not new. I'm not asking for either. I'm only learning how to be. Good. I'd be scared of someone who already knew. They didn't kiss then. That would come later. Instead they built a fire. Cooked beans over flame. And she pulled out the old scarf he'd never asked about, the one she'd hidden in the satchel with the smell of her first home, her worst memory. She threw it in the fire. Watched it burn. He didn't ask. But she whispered, It was my mother's. The flame cracked. And then it was gone. Later, he brought her to the porch, handed her a chair he'd sanded clean that morning. She sat. He sat beside her. The sky turned amber, then bruised. The last of the light poured itself across the field like honey on old linen. She turned to him, voice trembling but true. I think I want to belong here. He looked straight ahead. Then you already do. She reached out and touched the back of his hand. Not softly. Not shy. Like she meant it. The wind picked up and carried the scent of pine, ash, earth. And the porch, once a place where silence kept vigil, now held something new. A vow unspoken but real. Before the sun went down she had not just stayed. She had chosen. And in the choosing she had changed the shape of her name. The mornings were different now. Not because the sun rose any slower or the wind stopped sweeping across the fields. But because she rose with it. With purpose. With breath that didn't shake. She moved through the house like someone claiming it, not with noise but with hands. She polished the table that had always been dust gray, stitched new curtains for the kitchen, humming soft, tuneless notes while the stew simmered. The house no longer echoed. It answered. He repaired the barn beam, slower than he would have in younger years but steadier somehow. She watched him from the doorway, arms crossed, chin tilted slightly, not to judge but to memorize. How he limped on the right side. How he tapped each nail twice before striking. How the silence around him was never lonely. They shared the work. She milked in the morning. He chopped wood at dusk. And when their fingers brushed passing dishes or tools or the reins to the mule, neither pulled away. Sometimes they spoke. Other times they didn't need to. But the words had changed. So had the pauses. One morning she found a wooden box on the windowsill. Sanded smooth. No latch. She opened it and inside lay 3 items. A dried wildflower, a blue ribbon and a folded piece of paper. The handwriting was his. You're not what they named you. You're what you survived. And what you chose. She pressed the note to her chest and let herself cry. Not like before. Not from shame or ache. But from recognition. Later that week a neighbor came by, one of the women who used to glance too long, speak too low. She brought a jar of preserves and asked if the girl might help sew a christening gown for her niece. The girl didn't say yes. She said, I'd be honored. And just like that the world shifted. Not loudly. But enough. The days passed. One evening, as the wind turned colder and the trees began to rust, he found her sitting on the porch, her bare feet resting on the rail. She wore the shawl he'd given her, but differently now, loose, confident. She was staring at the sky like it owed her nothing. He sat beside her. Didn't speak. After a while she turned. I don't think I could go back. You don't need to. I mean, not just to that town. I mean to who I was. You buried her. She nodded. I didn't even say goodbye. Some goodbyes don't need saying. They sat until the sun dipped low and turned everything to fire. That night they lay side by side. Not touching but not apart. She whispered in the dark, I've never felt safe before. Not really. He answered without opening his eyes. That's what a home is. She smiled and turned toward him. I think I love this house, she said. And it was true. Because it wasn't just walls and roof anymore. It was where her name had changed shape. Where her worth had been returned, piece by trembling piece. The house, like her, had once been silent. Holding too many ghosts. Now it breathed. 1 week later they rode into town again. Not for supplies. Not for apologies. This time for paper. Marriage papers, signed in quiet ink, witnessed by no one but the wind and the dust and the mule that had carried them both. The clerk raised an eyebrow but said nothing. On the way home she leaned against his shoulder, not out of need, but want. Back at the house she took off her boots and stepped barefoot through the door. She touched the frame, the wall, the table like someone remembering what her own skin felt like. And when she turned to him, standing there like he always did, hat in hand, gaze low but warm, she simply said, Welcome home. He blinked. It's yours too. That night, he took down the faded photograph above the fireplace. He didn't burn it. He didn't hide it. He simply placed it in a drawer, closed it gently, and opened a space on the wall. She noticed. Didn't speak. But later, she hung a single stitched cloth in its place. Nothing fancy. Just 2 names side by side, and beneath them the word, enough. Fall arrived slow and golden. They stacked firewood and canned peaches. She taught him to read cursive. He taught her to patch leather. They argued once, about where to plant the winter kale, but when the wind howled that night, they sat close by the fire and passed the last biscuit between them. They no longer needed permission to take up space. And that was the miracle. Because in a world that once auctioned her worth, she had claimed her place. In a house once hollowed by loss, he had learned how to love without fear. She wasn't saved. She rose. He wasn't healed. He chose to stay open anyway. In the house. It finally breathed. Not just with life but with meaning. And if you passed by it today, just past the ridge where the cottonwoods lean, you'd see the porch light glowing even at dusk. You'd hear laughter, soft and unforced. You'd see 2 chairs always filled. And maybe if the wind was right, you'd hear the floorboards sigh like old bones settling into something warm. And perhaps you'd think, just maybe, that some broken things don't need fixing. They just need naming. So here's your naming. You two are not what they called you. You are what you carried. What you chose not to surrender. What you built, barefoot and bleeding. And if you're lucky, if you're brave, you might find your own house like that. One that learns to breathe again. Because of you. Because of love. And because, finally, you stayed. The snow had teeth that winter. It bit through coats, found the bones beneath skin, and turned breath to needles. She stumbled once, then twice, dragging a torn valise behind her like it mattered. It didn't. Nothing inside could save her. Not the stiff corset digging into her ribs. Not the gloves soaked through. Not the letter, crumpled now in her pocket, that begged some man to meet her on the edge of Wyoming territory. No one had come. She wasn't supposed to have walked alone through snowdrifts past her waist, but no one had offered her a wagon. The conductor had looked at her limp and said the man would know she was coming. She believed him. For 1 mile. Then 2. Then the sky turned dark before evening, and the trail vanished into wind. By the 5th mile her legs gave out. When she collapsed, her fingers were too stiff to pull the shawl closer. 1 boot had come apart at the toe, and blood seeped through where frost had cracked her heel. Her lips were blue. Her eyes glassing over. She whispered the name one last time, his name, but it vanished in the wind. The world dulled into white. The last thing she saw was hooves in the distance. Not thunderous, not galloping. Just steady. Measured. As if the horse had seen this sort of thing before. He rode like a man who didn't rush. Even as the wind cut sideways and snow curled around his hat brim, he didn't lean forward. Didn't call out. He watched the shape on the trail with squinting eyes and a hand near the rifle slung across his back. These hills could play tricks. He'd seen men shot for less than kindness. But as he dismounted, he saw her legs didn't twitch. 1 arm sprawled across the snowbank. The skin on her wrist was pale with frostbite. And then she breathed. Barely. God help me, he muttered, dropping to one knee. Her bonnet was half off, tangled in matted hair. No ring on her hand. But she wore a dress meant for traveling light, and marrying soon. The man's name was Jesse James. He wasn't known for rescuing women. 10 years on the frontier had shaped him different. He'd fought in the war, tracked outlaws for bounty, and worked briefly as a scout till the town turned sour on his silence. He didn't say much. Didn't pray much either. But when he scooped the girl into his arms and placed her across the saddle, he whispered something like a prayer under his breath. Not to God. To memory. The horse was old but sure-footed. They moved uphill toward the edge of the pine brake, toward a one-room cabin with an iron stove and one good quilt. Ellis didn't speak. Didn't look back. Just rode hard into the storm with her limp against his chest, her breath rattling. She didn't stir again until they reached the cabin. He laid her on the floor gently, near the heat. Stripped off her wet gloves. Her fingers were white, her nails dark. He frowned, unbuckled the saddlebag and drew out a flask of whiskey. He dabbed her lips with it, not sure if it would help. Then she coughed, dry and desperate. Her eyes fluttered open. Don't try to sit, he said low and firm. You're safe now. She blinked. Her mouth moved but no sound came. Just a crackling rasp. He poured a tin cup half full of warm water and lifted it to her mouth. She sipped, then stared at the fire. A full minute passed before she spoke. Did you see my brother? Ellis froze. You were alone. She tried to rise. Pain laced her expression. No, I wasn't. He said he'd meet me at the station. He had the wagon, he said. Her voice cracked and she dropped back onto the floorboards. He covered her with the quilt. What's your name? She hesitated. Then looked toward the door as if weighing the answer. Rose, she said finally. Rose? Callahan. The lie was practiced. Ellis didn't show it, but something in his chest clenched. He'd known a girl by that voice once, 10 years ago by the Red Willow Creek. Before she disappeared. He busied himself lighting the second lamp. Where were you headed, Rose? She looked away. To marry. That stopped him cold. He turned slowly. You walk 5 miles in a snowstorm and your groom didn't meet you? Her eyes glistened. He never showed. I got off that train and I waited. But the man who came said I was too late. That I'd missed the auction. Ellis's voice dropped. What auction? She shook her head. Nothing. Doesn't matter now. He didn't press. Just turned to the stove and stirred the pot of beans he'd left cooking that morning. She watched him, barely moving. When he finally offered her a spoonful, she took it with shaking hands. Later, when she dozed against the wall wrapped in wool, he crouched beside her valise. It had burst at the seam. He gathered the scattered contents with careful fingers. A folded dress. A cracked comb. A single pair of shoes. And one letter. He didn't mean to read it. Not really. But her name wasn't Rose Callahan. The envelope was addressed to Mr. Albert Brand. His brother. Dead 5 winters. The woman murmured something in her sleep. A name. His name. Ellis stared. He remembered her now. Not just the voice. The necklace too, a blue stone shaped like a teardrop. A Navajo boy had carved it for her. Ellis had watched her wear it back then, all proud and laughing. She'd been his first love. And then she'd married his brother. The room felt smaller. The fire too loud. He paced once, twice, then sat in the corner, hat low, rifle beside him. Outside, the snow hadn't stopped. The world was blanketed in white, quiet as death. But something stirred in him. He didn't know if it was anger or something older. Something like regret. In the middle of the night, she cried out. He rushed to her side. Her skin was slick with sweat, her body curled into itself like she was hiding from something. He gripped her shoulder. Wake up, Rose. Wake up. She opened her eyes, wide and terrified. No, don't let him, don't let them sell me again, please. Her voice cracked into sobs. Ellis froze. No one's selling you, he said rougher than he meant. Not now. Not while you're under my roof. She blinked hard. You don't even know me. I know enough. No, she whispered. You don't. He stood up, poured her water, waited, then added quieter, maybe not. But I know the kind of men who throw women to snow and call it justice. I seen enough. Her breathing slowed. Do you have a name? He hesitated. Brand. Her head jerked toward him. He didn't clarify. Didn't say Ellis. Didn't say brother of the man who once made her promises and broke them like twigs. But she heard it. She saw it. Her lips parted in stunned recognition. but she said nothing. He turned back to the fire. Get rest. We'll talk when the storm's done. She lay back slowly, eyes still on him. Ellis didn't sleep that night. Neither did she. By morning the wind had dropped, but tension hung thicker than smoke. They moved through the cabin like strangers who'd once danced together but couldn't name the song. As he cleaned his rifle, she stared at the quilt covering her legs. I never meant to come here. Not to this place. Not to you. I didn't ask you to. Silence stretched between them like the plains outside. But in the silence, something fragile bloomed. Recognition. Regret. Possibly even the flicker of old love. Before midday, hoofbeats cracked through the snow. Ellis rose, stepped to the window and stared down the trail. A lone rider. Black coat. Hat low. And behind him, another. 3 riders total. He didn't move. Just stared. Then he turned to her. Someone's coming. She tensed. Her voice a whisper. They found me. He looked her dead in the eye. Then we'll find out what they want. Outside the snow started again. Light this time. But steady. She pulled the quilt tighter. And Jesse James, silent no more, reached for his rifle. The snow had quieted, but the air remained sharp as flint. Morning slid across the cabin window in pale ribbons, casting a tired light on the 2 figures inside. The woman still sat wrapped in the quilt, legs tucked beneath her, her eyes darting between the stove and the man cleaning his rifle in the corner. Ellis hadn't spoken since the riders passed through the night. He'd watched from the window as their shapes disappeared into the blizzard again. 3 men, maybe more, no words exchanged. Not yet. But it meant trouble was on the wind. Trouble she'd brought with her. She hadn't touched her food. Her face was a little less gray now. Her fingers no longer stiff. But her eyes, those still held frost. Not from the cold. From remembering things she'd rather forget. He stood, the weight of the rifle shifting across his shoulder. Storm's easing. I need to bring in wood. She didn't answer. He hesitated at the door. If someone comes, don't open it. Her voice came softer than snow. Wouldn't know who to trust anyhow. He stepped outside into a cold that burned. The snow had softened overnight, and the air smelled of pine and thaw. But he wasn't fooled. Spring was still months away. He split wood like it owed him something, like he could chop clean through the confusion boiling in his chest. Inside she reached for her valise. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Some things had dried, others had curled with moisture. She fished out a comb, a spare petticoat, and the letter. That cursed letter. She ran a finger along the name again. Albert Brandt. Ink blurred where her thumb had pressed too many times. She'd written him out of desperation. After everything, after her husband's debts, the beatings, the night he lost her in a card game, she'd written Albert. She had nowhere else to go. And it hadn't been love she sought. It had been escape. But here she was with Ellis instead. The man she had once wanted. The boy who had gone off to war and never returned. And now they sat across from each other like strangers sown from the same sorrow. When he returned, snow clinging to his boots, he saw the letter in her lap. You kept it, he said flatly. She didn't look up. I didn't know he was gone. They said he had land. Said he needed a bride. I never would have, if I'd known. He removed his coat, slung it over a chair, then poured water from the kettle. I didn't know you were still alive either, she added. Ellis handed her a cup. I didn't know I was either. Not for a long time. She flinched at the edge in his voice. You left without a word. Didn't reckon I had a right to say goodbye. You did. He stared at the fire. He said you chose him. I didn't, she snapped, voice tight. I was told you died. They buried your uniform. They held a service, Ellis. His name on her lips silenced the room. He looked at her now. Not as the broken girl in the snow, but as the woman he'd loved, buried, and mourned, only to find again married to a man who deserved no one's love. You were wearing his ring. I wore it like a chain. He clenched his jaw. He beat you. She said nothing, but her silence screamed. His knuckles whitened around the tin cup. Then he got what he earned. Died with nothing but cards in his hands. She nodded slowly. And I got sold off before the dirt on his grave settled. Ellis moved to the window, watching the trees. The world outside was too calm for what boiled in his gut. The man who bought you. He coming for you? I don't know, she whispered. He said I'd fetch a good price in the next town. But I jumped the wagon when he stopped for whiskey. I ran till my boots bled. Ellis turned, eyes sharp now. He'll come looking. I know. He crossed the room, opened a drawer, and placed a loaded revolver on the table between them. She stared at it. You think I should use that? No, he said. I think I might have to. She looked up at him for the first time with something like the embers of old trust. You saved me, she murmured. He met her gaze. You don't remember the night by the river, do you? Pause. Her hand moved to her throat, to the pendant that hung there, dull and half-hidden. I remember, she said. You wore that same necklace. You gave it to me. I carved it. Her voice cracked. You said it was a promise. It was. The silence between them this time didn't hurt. It just lingered like something half-healed. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps on wood. Alice stood instantly, motioning her back. She slipped behind the stove, eyes wide. He approached the door slow, rifle in hand. Who is it? A man's voice answered, smooth as polished bone. Name's Creighton. Looking for a woman, came off the late train. Ran off with someone's property. Alice didn't open the door. You'll have to go to the sheriff in Cheyenne for property disputes. She ain't in Cheyenne, the man said. She's in there. Alice kept his voice level. You got proof? The man chuckled. I got the receipt. Alice opened the door just enough to see him. A tall man in a black coat, snow on his shoulders, a grin too big for his face. Behind him were 2 others, one with a scar over his mouth, the other carrying rope. Alice didn't blink. There's no one here matching that description. You sure? I'm sure you're not welcome on my land. Creighton leaned forward. She's carrying something worth more than gold. You sure you don't want to share? Alice's hand tightened on the doorframe. If I ever see you again, I'll bury you under that pine yonder. Creighton's grin didn't fade. You always so polite, mister? But Alice didn't answer. Just shut the door. He turned back. She was standing now, pale as ash. They'll come back, she said. Let them. I can't let you die for me. You're not going to stop me. She stepped forward. Why would you risk your life? He stared at her, jaw tight. Because I couldn't save you last time. Her breath caught. You think I married your brother by choice? She whispered. You think I wanted to survive like that? I don't think anything anymore. I just know what I see now. Tears welled in her eyes. And what's that? A woman with nothing left to run from. She looked away. I'm pregnant. The words hit like a thunderclap. Alice didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just let them settle. I don't want this child to be born into shame, she added. Or to carry a name soaked in violence. You want it to carry yours? He asked gently. She looked up, startled. I'm not asking for anything, she said. I know. But I want to raise this baby far from those men. Far from that past. Alice looked at the door again. You might not have come here to find me, he said, but I reckon fate had its own trail. She approached him now, cautious but unafraid. I didn't come here to fall in love again. Neither did I. She touched his sleeve. But I never stopped. His breath caught. Outside the wind shifted. Inside the fire burned steady. By dusk he'd packed supplies. She helped lace the saddle. Her hands still shook, but they were determined now. Like she'd remembered how to hope. As night fell, they stood at the doorway together. Where will we go? She asked. Where no one knows your name, he said. Where we both get to start over. And as she mounted behind him, arms around his waist, the letter still in her pocket, she whispered something into his coat. I remember the river. I remember everything. And Alice, for the first time in 10 winters, smiled. The next morning came like a breath held too long. Alice stood at the edge of the trees, watching the trail with narrowed eyes. The storm had lifted, but the danger hadn't. His rifle rested against a branch, boots sunk deep in the melting snow, breath curling in the morning air. He didn't say a word when the sun crept over the pines, just stared toward the horizon, waiting for the shadows to return. Inside she made tea. Her hands had steadied. Her movements, once timid, now carried purpose. She didn't ask if they'd leave today. She only folded what little she had and tucked the old letter deep in her valise. Her hair was brushed back, her face pale but no longer broken. When he came in, she turned toward him. You slept at all? No need, he said. I've rested enough in my life. She held out the cup. Then at least drink something warm. He hesitated, then took it. Their fingers brushed. She sat near the stove, quiet for a long while. I had a name once. Before I became a bride. Before I became a sale. Alice didn't sit, but his eyes stayed on her. It was Josephine Marcus. His throat worked. I remember. After you left, I didn't speak it aloud for a year. People called me Mrs. Brand. But it never fit. Her voice was tight. I thought names gave you a place in the world. Turns out they just make it easier to be claimed. He looked down at the floorboards. You think I stopped saying yours? She glanced up. Did you? No, he said. I just whispered it less. Josephine Marcus set her cup aside. We were kids, Alice. But I meant it. That day by the river. I never loved anyone the same. He walked to the mantel, fingers grazing the edge. Then why him? I was told you were dead. And your brother? He came to me wearing your boots. His jaw clenched. He told me to honor your memory by marrying him. That it was what you'd want. That bastard. Her voice grew small. I didn't know who I was anymore. My parents were gone. The farm taken. And he said I needed a man to keep me safe. Alice turned, eyes shadowed. He was never safe. No, she said. But I survived him. Barely. A log in the stove cracked. Sparks leapt behind the grate. Neither of them moved. She stood slowly. Do you hate me? No. But you should. I tried, he said. For years. Tried to forget your voice, your face, the way you smiled. But you can't scrub love out with grit. It stays. Like ash in your lungs. Her eyes welled, but she didn't cry. She came closer until the space between them held only truth. I was afraid if you knew the truth, you wouldn't look at me the same. Alice raised a brow. What truth? That I let him break me. That I let them bid on me. That I carry something inside me that isn't yours. He looked at her belly, still flat beneath the dress, then back at her eyes. You carry life. That's what I see. She looked away. He placed a hand gently on her arm. And if you're looking for who's to blame for what happened to you, it ain't you. Her shoulders trembled. But before she could speak, a gunshot cracked through the pines. Alice grabbed his rifle, ran to the door. Josephine Marcus dropped to the floor instinctively, covering her head, breath caught in her throat. Outside, 3 riders crested the hill. Dust and snow kicked up beneath hooves. The man in black was at the center. Creighton. Alice cocked his rifle and stepped out onto the porch. This ain't the day you want. Creighton smiled like a man who'd already sold the victory. We came for what's ours. She's not yours. You gonna die to prove it? Alice stepped down, boots crunching frost. If I have to. The man beside Creighton raised a rifle. Alice fired first. The bullet caught the man in the shoulder, spun him from the saddle. The others returned fire, and Alice dove behind the water trough, heart pounding. Bullets split the wood post beside his head. One grazed his coat. Inside, Josephine Marcus crawled to the back room, grabbed the pistol Alice had left on the shelf. Her hands shook, but she didn't hesitate. When Creighton dismounted and crept toward the cabin, she waited by the back window. The moment his shadow crossed the sill, she fired. The shot missed his chest but nicked his leg. He screamed, stumbled, and dropped behind a stump. Alice heard it, grinned through gritted teeth, and returned fire. The second rider went down. Creighton scrambled for cover, breathing hard. She shoots like a madwoman. Alice stepped into view, rifle steady. She shoots like someone who remembers her name. Creighton's eyes flicked toward his dead man, then to his bleeding thigh. This ain't over. Feels over to me. Creighton's horse spooked. He tried to mount, limping, but Josephine Marcus opened the door, pistol in both hands. Don't move, she said, voice flat. Creighton froze. Alice lowered his rifle. Go on, he said. Tell the others. She ain't for sale. Creighton snarled, blood trailing down his leg. You'll both hang for this. We'll be long gone. Josephine Marcus's hand trembled, but her aim didn't. Creighton backed away, mounted with effort, and rode off. The second man, still breathing, followed, cradling his arm. Alice exhaled, then turned to Josephine Marcus. She hadn't lowered the gun. Her whole body shook now, lips parted, breath shallow. He walked toward her. It's done. I shot him. You did. I meant to. You had to. She dropped the gun and fell into his arms, sobbing, not from fear but from release. From the kind of relief that only comes when a woman reclaims herself from the world that tried to break her. He held her wordless. Later, as dusk painted the cabin in amber and smoke, they sat close by the stove. She rested her head on his shoulder. I don't know how to start over, she whispered. You already did, he said. When you ran. When you chose to live. She turned to him. What now? He touched her cheek. We bury the past, and then we build something new. Her fingers curled over his. Will you stay with me? I ain't going anywhere. Outside, the wind blew softer. Inside, the ashes of who they were drifted into the cracks of the floor and vanished. What remained was something neither of them could name. But it was theirs. The sun cracked through the clouds 2 mornings later. Snow melted off the roof in slow drops, dripping steady into the thawing dirt below. The storm had passed, but a quieter reckoning lingered. Ellis stood by the shed, sleeves rolled, hammer in hand. He wasn't fixing anything in particular, just needed motion, something to keep his hands busy, something to outrun the thoughts. Josephine Marcus sat on the porch step with a needle and thread, mending the hem of her second dress. Her belly was still barely curved, but something about the way she touched it now, soft, almost reverent, made it feel more real. She hadn't spoken much since the shooting. Neither had he. But silence between them no longer hurt. They'd crossed through fire and come out breathing. Still, both knew it wasn't over. By noon, a rider came fast from the north. Dust, not snow, trailed him this time. His coat bore the red sash of a district marshal. He dismounted without a word and approached the cabin like a man who didn't ask twice. Ellis met him halfway. Looking for someone? The marshal squinted. Looking for 3, actually. Heard about gunfire. 1 man dead. 1 wounded. 1 vanished. Ellis didn't blink. All true. And the woman they were after? She's here. The marshal crossed his arms. That woman was marked as stolen property in a trade agreement under territorial law. She ain't property, Ellis said coldly. She's a person. And no piece of paper justifies selling a widow like cattle. Josephine Marcus stood behind him now. Quiet but not afraid. The marshal looked at her. You got anything to say for yourself, miss? I ran, she said. Because I was being sold. Because no one else would stop it. You killed a man. I protected myself. The marshal exhaled. You'll need to speak that to a judge. Ellis stepped forward. And where's that judge? Sheriff setting up trial in Overstead. That's 2 days' ride. I'll take her, Ellis said. Josephine Marcus looked at him sharply. The marshal raised a brow. You willing to vouch for her? You take her, you answer for her. Ellis nodded once. I already do. The marshal gave a tight nod and handed him a paper. Be there by Friday. If you're not, I come looking. As the rider turned and galloped off, Josephine Marcus stepped beside Ellis. You're risking everything. No, he said. I'm finally doing something right. They packed light, food, blankets, the revolver, and the letter. He saddled the horse, helped her up, and they set off down the thawing trail. 2 days passed in cold wind and steady riding. At night, they camped beneath stars, wrapped in wool and silence. On the second morning, they crossed into Overstead just past dawn. The town was already stirring. Men hammered boards outside the courthouse. A wooden gallows stood half-built beside it. Ellis frowned at the sight. Josephine Marcus paled. That's not for me, is it? They won't hang a pregnant woman, he said, but his voice held little comfort. The sheriff met them at the stables. Thin, humorless, and smelling of tobacco, he didn't bother with courtesy. You the ones from Cold Hollow? We are, Ellis said. The sheriff waved toward the courthouse. Trial's at noon. Don't wander. They sat on the bench outside, hands clasped tight. The town whispered. Some folks stared. Others spat. Inside, the courtroom held no jury. Just a judge with ink-stained fingers, the sheriff, a clerk, and a preacher. Josephine Marcus stepped forward alone. Ellis rose too, but the sheriff barred him. She speaks for herself. Josephine Marcus turned once, eyes meeting Ellis's, and nodded. She stood at the center of the room as the judge asked her name. Josephine Marcus Callahan Brand, she said, voice clear. Who did you kill? No one. I shot a man who tried to drag me back into slavery. The judge arched a brow. You were bought fair under auction. I was never his to buy. But you went willingly. No, she said. I went with hope. I thought I was answering a letter from a kind man. I found a monster instead. The preacher stirred. You carry child? I do. The room stilled. And do you claim that this Jesse James, your late husband's brother, is the father? Josephine Marcus's voice cracked. No. But he's the man who treated me like I was worth saving. The judge leaned back. Law favors contracts, but it favors witnesses too. Ellis stepped forward. I've seen what she's running from. I'll sign any paper, swear any vow, take any oath you ask. The preacher studied him. Would you marry her? Ellis didn't flinch. I would have 10 years ago. And I still would now. Josephine Marcus's eyes widened. Tears pooled. The court hushed. The judge tapped his pen. You'll marry today. In this room. Before God and law. Alice looked to her, waiting for the slightest nod. She gave it. The preacher opened his Bible. There were no flowers, no rings, no music. But when Alice held her hand and repeated those words, the room changed. So did she. Her chin lifted, her voice steady. She was no longer the woman dying in snow. She was standing on her own name. After the vows, the judge tore the auction contract in half and tossed it in the firebox. Let this die with it. They left the courthouse arm in arm. The sheriff muttered something about paperwork, but neither of them listened. They mounted the horse and rode until the town shrank behind them. They didn't speak for hours. Not until the trees returned and the sky opened wide above the ridge. "You meant it?" she asked softly. "Every word." He turned, eyes shining. "I knew who you were the moment you said your name. I just needed you to remember who you were too." She leaned into him, arms tight around his waist. "I don't want to forget again." "You won't," he said. "Because this time I'm not going anywhere." They rode through twilight. Wind in their coats. Ashes behind them. Life ahead. And on that trail, with the scent of thaw and pine in the air, a woman once sold became someone's wife. A man once broken by grief became someone's home. And a child yet unborn rode between the two, proof that even in the coldest season, something new could grow.